have a special treat, the keynote speaker, Wilhemina Kelly. She's a Brooklyn historian and author. I have to confess, I have not read your book. I'm going to look for it. And a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And also, I believe you're a society member, right?
Yes, I am.
She's also a member of the Society of Old Brooklynites. That's inspiration to who is not a member to join. Did anybody bring applications? No.
Come to our September 1st meeting.
September 1st meeting at the Surrogates Court on the 2nd floor. And we'll sign you up. Sherman, what's the dues, yearly dues now? $10. Please. Do us a favor. We need the membership. And everybody's welcome. I think the qualifications of 25 years, either working or living in Brooklyn. But we can have you as an honorary member until that 25-year is met. Please. Okay, Wilhemina?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. As we stand here today, on the 234th anniversary of the Battle of Brooklyn, it's hard to picture the landscape, housing, and primeval environment that once existed here all those years ago. When George Washington and his troops fought that first battle of the Revolutionary War, Fort Putnam stood on this very site. Several other forts garrisoned the Patriot soldiers, including Fort Box on Pacific and Bond Street, which was the first in the line that stretched its way to Wallabout Bay, the location of today's Brooklyn Navy Yard. 1,000 feet to the left of Fort Box was Fort Greene on today's Bond Street between State and Schermerhorn, the largest fort on Long Island, and not to be confused with today's Fort Greene Park. 1 block over, at DeKalb and Hudson Avenue, was also a circular fort called the Oblong Redoubt, which, together with Fort Greene, were the defense line if the British approached along the Jamaica Highway, or what is today known as Fulton Street. Britain's General Howe did, in fact, travel along Jamaica Highway on their way to do battle on August 27, and paused at the fork of what is today's Fulton Street near Bedford Avenue, making the decision to travel south on Clove Road to do battle with General John Sullivan, for which Sullivan Place in Crown Heights is named, before turning north to do battle at Prospect Hill. Records show that the British immediately figured that Washington would cross right back to Queens, most likely at the Astoria ferry dock. Directly after their victory, British troops occupied the high ground of Cypress Hills and Forest Park to meet the expected American landing. After a few days of breaking into houses, stealing food and valuables, as well as livestock, most of the British and Hessian invaders finally crossed to Manhattan. As we all know, Washington lost that first battle, counting 300 men dead and 1,000 captured. This in spite of the additional support of Fort Defiance on Red Hook, Fort Sterling on Brooklyn Heights, and Fort Cobble Hill near Atlantic and Port Street. Famously, the Patriots were forced to escape in the fog of early morning of August 30, traveling along Red Hook Lane to the shoreline. Washington and his 9,000 troops, with all their equipment, safely evacuated to Manhattan. In fact, a bronze plaque set on a boulder at Old Fulton Street and Fulton Ferry Landing commemorates the waterside location of that historic event, retreat. Within a fortnight, British scouts and advance patrols crossed from Brooklyn to Kips Bay Landing, located at 35th Street and the East River in today's Manhattan. Observers from the heights of Long Island say the transport of the Army crossing the East River was particularly memorable and an imposing sight. One eyewitness who remembered the September 15 event recalled, and I quote, "The British crossed the East River in open flat boats, filled with soldiers standing erect, their soldiers glittering in the sunlight, where they again bombarded the American positions on the shore. Having lost that battle, Washington again retreated north at about 3 p.m., and by nightfall, his troops were fully encamped. The next day, on September 16, they again engaged the British. It was this Battle of Harlem Heights that finally handed the Americans their first battlefield victory and restored the Patriots' commitment to continue their struggle for independence. Ultimately, however, while Washington battled, New York City and all its present boroughs fell under martial law for the remaining 7 years of the war. A number of occupying camps were set up throughout Long Island during this time, including a station in what is now Sunnyside Yards. This enabled the British to control Newtown Port, Newtown Creek, and Dutch Kills, which were used as supply depots and winter havens for warships. The intersection of Bergen Street and Franklin Avenue near what was then Bedford Township and the heart of today's Bedford-Stuyvesant housed foot soldiers in winter dugouts and summer tents during the hot summer months. Evidence of this Brooklyn occupation was still visible as late as 1909. And a plaque, which I discovered, I live in Queens, although I'm back and forth to Brooklyn a lot. I live right near Brookville Park in Queens, and after about 15 years of living in Queens, I discovered this plaque that is a tribute to a patriot who was executed right in the park, and I had passed it so many times and not realized that the British were in Queens. They were right on my doorstep, and they were actively maintaining their control over New York City. The officers and non-commissioned officers occupied the homes of local residents, with 10 to 20 officers assigned to an entire house. When ordered to take just one room in the home, they often chose the kitchen, setting up hammocks in tiers. At this time, it was mandatory for local residents to tip their hats outdoors to British soldiers and stand with eyes lowered when speaking to troops within their own homes. This, of course, was but a small humiliation when one considers the sufferings of the 11,500 patriots who died aboard the prison ships anchored in Wallabout Bay. And of those 11,500, at least 1,500 were people of color. Years of struggle were required to secure the Doric column behind me, which stands as a majestic memorial to the loss of life and recognition of the commitment of those dedicated soldiers. The Society of Old Brooklynites has labored diligently and successfully throughout its 147-year existence to preserve this history, most notably in compiling the list of patriot martyrs who perished on the British prison ship. Military and heritage organizations, such as the Daughters of the American Revolution, Sons of the Revolution, and Sons of the American Revolution, have over the years actively taken steps to preserve the location and memory of so many patriot sacrifices. Evidence of committed remembrance by the general public, however, sadly seems to be waning. It continues to fall upon our shoulders to protect the history, prevent the demolition of our country's shrines and architectural treasures, and ensure that American history classes in our schools become less a dreaded exercise and more of an opportunity to learn about the men and women who died for the freedoms we enjoy today. Vigilance in monitoring the decisions of our elected officials has also become an urgent responsibility. It is unfortunate to know that Red Hook Lane, the pathway traveled by Washington and his men in the 1776 retreat from Brooklyn, now only exists as a one-block fragment of the roadway. Sadder still to note that even this small fragment has been demapped, a term which means the removal of a street or location from future map production, so that the road or site appears to have never existed. The same plans are currently being made for Clove Road, scene of General John Sullivan's battle, and an ancient Native American roadway. This pathway through Brooklyn's Green Mountains once connected the old townships of Bedford and Flatbush, a road well-trod by Dutch farmers in America's colonial years when bringing produce to Brooklyn and Manhattan markets. The 1787 Erasmus Hall Academy Building, too, the oldest secondary school in New York State, although a landmark, is also presently in danger of demolition due to ongoing neglect. What has happened in the past few years to detract our commitment to our historic national shrines? As late as 1944, poetry was still being written about the American Revolution, including the work by Willis Bowden titled Battle of Brooklyn, which recounted Washington's escape. In 1951, a U.S. postage stamp was minted commemorating the Battle of Long Island with the notation, "Washington saves his army at Brooklyn," and I have a copy under my seat for anyone who would like to see it after the ceremony. I believe poet Carl Sandburg actually had it right when he noted, "When a nation goes down or a society perishes, one condition may always be found: they forgot where they came from." And in closing, we as citizens, as historians, as members of viable organizations such as the Society of Old Brooklynites, still have much to do in preserving our history, in demanding an appropriate remembrance, and in overseeing the maintenance of our artifacts. Together, we can protect the foundations of our city and country, and by example, ultimately motivate the next generation to do the same.